In the last step, we created a Spring Boot project, imported it into our IDE Eclipse, and we were able to launch it up. In this step, let's focus on creating a Hello World REST API. I would go into our COM in 28 minutes REST Web Services, RESTful Web Services package. I'd do a right click, new class. I'd want to create a Hello World controller. And I would put it into a package .restful web services .hello world. And I would say finish. What do we want to do in here? Number one, we would want to expose a REST API. So this controller would expose a REST API. So that's number one. Number two, we would want to actually give a specific URL to the REST API. Let's say we would want to call this -hello world. When somebody types in -hello world into the browser, that's basically localhost :8080/hello world into the browser, what we want to do is we would want to return a piece of text back. We would want to return hello world back. That's what we would want to do as part of this specific controller. So let's start with creating a simple method. So I'll create a method, public. The return value is string. So let's return a string back. I would need to give this method a name. I'll call this hello world. And inside the body of the method, I'd want to just return the string back, hello world. So let's do that. So we are now returning hello world from this specific method. Now, how do I expose this at this specific URL? The first step is to mark this controller as a REST controller. And the way you can mark that controller as a REST controller is using the annotation @REST controller. If you do an organize imports, Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, you should see an import come in org.springframework.web.bind.annotation.REST controller. This is the annotation which will make this specific controller a REST controller. We can expose a REST API from here. And we want to give a specific URL to this specific method. How can we do that? One of the ways you can do that is by adding a request mapping. So I can say request mapping. You can see that the import is org Spring Framework Web Bind Annotation Request Mapping. And over here, what we are doing is making use of the get method. So when user types something into the browser, what we are executing is a get method. So we would want to map this request to a get method. So we can say method is equal to request method. Again, a similar import is coming in org Spring Framework Web Bind Annotation .get. We would want to map this method to a get request. On which URL? We can configure that by making use of the path. So path is equal to whatever we have in here. So hello world is what we would want to map. So let's remove all the comments which are present in here and save this. Now you would see that the application would restart and pick up our change. You can go over to your browser, localhost :8080/hello-world. That's the URL we have created. And you can see hello world text coming back. That's awesome. If you had any problems with this, the first thing you need to check is the package of hello world controller. Make sure that it's under a sub package of the package where RESTful Web Service application is present. The RESTful Web Services application is present in COM in 28 minutes REST Web Services, RESTful Web Services. And I've created hello world controller in a sub package of it. In the package COM in 28 minutes REST Web Services, RESTful Web Services, hello world. And this is where the hello world controller package is in. The second thing you need to make sure is that you have the annotation @REST controller on the class. The third thing is to make sure that you have a @request mapping annotation with the right method and path. The method is request method.get and the path is hello world. If you get everything right, then you should see a response coming back when you send a request to localhost :8080 hello world. Congratulations on getting your first hello world REST API working. Now, we would want to improve this further. There is a better way of doing this mapping, and the way I would recommend doing this mapping is by using something called @getMapping. It's another annotation. If I do a control-1 or command-1 and do an import, you should see an import coming in, org Spring Framework web bind annotation getMapping. And when you use a getMapping, you don't need to specify the method. So I can just remove this method from here and just leave the path in. Similar to getMapping, there are methods like postMapping, putMapping, and a lot of other methods which you can use. And I feel this is much more readable than making use of @requestMapping. So this is what we'll be making use of as we go further in this course as well. So I'll save this. I'll organize the imports. We are not making use of these two imports right now, requestMapping and request method. I'll organize imports. Those imports would disappear and I'll save the code. Wait for the application to pick up the change and refresh. Cool. I'm getting the same response as I was earlier. In this step, we were able to create a Hello World controller. In this controller, we created a method that is mapped to Hello World URL, and we are returning a simple Hello World response back. Are you ready for more complex challenges? Let's look at them in the next step.